This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. The men you are about to hear have spent more than 50 years in prison. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham, and to my right, Mr. Raul Lopez, and to my left, our guest, Regional Director of Operations for Sequel Youth and Family Services, State of Florida, Mr. Manny Alvarez. How are you doing today?
I am excellent. Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here.
Great to have you. We just want to go into and unpack. You work in juvenile justice.
That's correct.
What is a day in the life like for you working with youth in that realm?
Oh, you start off with the difficult ones. Okay. No, it's funny. And it's a great question. It's a very multifaceted field, and in my role, I am no longer privileged to work at one particular location. So it embodies a multitude of things. When you talk about juvenile justice, I referenced earlier, it's a multifaceted industry. A day in the life is doing work with our teams of mental health clinicians that specialize in the therapeutic services that we provide the young men and women in our care, working with our dietary managers and food service workers, working with our business office managers in terms of finance and accounting, working with human resources in terms of staff retention, staff morale, things of that nature, working with our operations people, our juvenile corrections officers, our supervisors, our floor staff. So working with the operational component of it, working with upper level administrators, facility administrators, assistant facility administrators, and then working with our team of medical professionals, nurses, physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, certified behavioral analysts. So it really encompasses a multitude of things, and it's a very dynamic field. Sometimes people think corrections or juvenile corrections, and they kind of get in the mindset that it's very punitive and it's just, incarceration. And it's strictly supervision, but there's many elements of the field that go into that and that we work with, and I'm privileged to work with all those individuals on a day-to-day basis.
Is there any one event that you can point to, or even a series of events, or maybe it was just a personal decision that caused you to get involved with juvenile correction?
My involvement and my interest in the juvenile justice field was a direct correlation of my social life being a priority over my academic life when I was in college. Story is I found myself after one semester with somewhat of an unfavorable grade point average, and I went to the academic dean for the School of Criminology. I was a graduate. I was attending the school at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. And I went to the dean and I said, I need some easy classes here. I need some electives. I need a way to kind of get this GPA up there because I'm tired of answering phone calls from mom and dad calling why are my grades unfavorable. And I have my professors, kind of on my back. And she said, Manny, there's a course called Introduction to Juvenile Justice, and all it entails is having to volunteer and devote your time to working with at-risk juveniles. She said, at the end of the semester, we're going to ask you to write a term paper about your experiences, what you learned, and what you got from the course. And if you have any semblance of decent writing skills or anything, there's no reason why you shouldn't get an A or a B in the course as long as you fulfill the hourly commitment that you need to make throughout the semester. I did it, and midway through the semester, I fell in love with the class because, one, it was going to be the easiest A I've ever gotten. As the time went on, I fell in love with the class because of the type of clients I had the privilege of serving and working with, and I took a real liking and investment in that type of population. So when that semester ended, I went to the dean and I said, hey, I loved it. I want to learn more. Are there any additional opportunities within the school, to take coursework specializing in juveniles and juvenile correction? So I did that. At the time, juvenile corrections was a blossoming industry. It was a blossoming organization in the state of Florida. It was something that was new and evolving, so I saw it as a great opportunity to kind of really learn and get in there at that time. And, I'm very thankful for the opportunity that I did. Here I am, 20 some odd years later, and still working with that same population I volunteered with when I was in school.
Very interesting. You go to raise your grades and you fall in love with a career
That's
that's
correct.
now turned into 20 some odd years. Manny, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Definitely. I come from a family of Cuban immigrants. I was the first person in my family privileged to be born in the United States. Born and raised in South Florida, lived in Miami a majority of my adult life, with the exception of 4 years that I went away to school. As I indicated earlier, I was a graduate of Florida State University, so I'm proud to be a Seminole. And most recently, over the last 4 years, I've spent the last 4 years of my life living in Broward County, where I currently reside with my wife and 2 kids.
Is there anything that you can think of from the standpoint of what you do on a day-to-day basis where you've been challenged, but God help you to overcome?
I think our biggest challenges in our line of work is that you have a very eclectic mix of individuals that you're trying to get to work collaboratively towards achieving a common goal, which is the care and the well-being of those residents entrusted in our care. And when I talk about that diverse group of individuals that we work with, you could have a front level staff. You could have a front level staff with minimal education, unfortunately making only so much money an hour, and then that ranges from that individual to individuals who are required to have 4-year degrees, to individuals who are required to have master's degrees, to individuals who are required to have state licenses in certain areas, be it. Then you're talking about nurses, you're talking about physicians, you're talking about psychiatrists. You see, there's a big disparity from the entry level worker to potentially an actual doctor. There's differences in their upbringing, their education, their employment history, what they all bring to the table. So to kind of get all of those individuals to merge, to coexist with one another, to share a vision and execute that vision collaboratively for the one purpose, which is the goal of really adhering to the needs of our clients, it's a challenge. That's probably our biggest challenge. There's one thing that we're very fortunate to do is throughout the facilities that we operate statewide, we have an excellent relationship with the local school districts, which we partner with, and the local school districts come in, provide academic curriculum for these young men and women, and these young men and women are receiving the same academic coursework and academic services that any young man or woman would receive at a local high school. They have credit recovery programs to help them get to where they need to be. They have fast-track GED programs for those young men or women who maybe are a little too old now and kind of got a late start on things, so they have an opportunity to graduate. And then many of them, also work with these young men and women in offering distance learning upon graduation or upon receipt of a GED, so they could take some form of correspondence coursework or online coursework with a respective local university or community college.
Manny, give me an age range in here from what ages to what ages?
That's a good question. The typical age range, I would say, is a typical high school age kid, 15 to 18 years old. There are exceptions to that where you may get a young man or woman sometimes, as young as 13 or 14. Those are the exceptions. And there are instances where you'll see a young man, exceeding the age of 19, 20 years old. Those are rarities. Historically and traditionally in the juvenile justice system, that cutoff point is at the age of 19 years old. Many of these young men, upon reaching that age, will be released from their commitment, or potentially could be direct filed to the adult system based on the severity of their offense or why they're there. Or many of them, there's the ability to hold them beyond that date. It's important to acknowledge that one thing that differentiates us who work in the juvenile justice system than that of the Department of Corrections is that successful release and being reintegrated into your respective community and release from our residential commitment programs is not predicated on a time length. You're not sentenced there to say, hey, you're going to receive a year in jail, and on that 1 year mark, you can mark it on your calendar, you're getting out. In the juvenile justice system, it's predicated on your treatment, your progress in treatment or lack thereof. Thus meaning a young man who goes in there or a young woman who goes in there does everything that's expected of him or her, does well in school, participates in mental health counseling, does all of their, community service hours, takes care of all of their court-ordered sanctions. That young man or woman may have the ability to leave earlier as opposed to one who's there non-compliant, being disruptive, not following expectations or norms, and just kind of marching to their own beats. So it is predicated on successful completion of your treatment objectives or lack thereof.
I had another question. How do drugs play a role in the arrest, incarceration of these youths?
So it's in two ways, and as I alluded to earlier, many of the young men and women that come into our care do have some form of diagnosis of having a substance abuse issue, whether it be abuse or dependency. Now, drugs plays a role in that two ways. You have the user, who, as a result of their utilization of drugs, unfortunately, while under the influence, has gone out and committed offenses, acted out in a way or manner which is traditionally unbecoming of him or her as a result of being under the influence. And then you have the other side, which is not the utilization, but you have the side of the criminal element of drugs, which is as a result of my desire to use drugs, I am now going out and committing criminal offenses to get the means in order to obtain more drugs, be it robbing individuals or breaking into houses or doing whatever it takes to meet that need. And then there's also the element of that's the drugs abuser, but then there's also the individual who chooses to sell narcotics and gets incarcerated as a result of his, illegal dealings with, selling street drugs or pharmaceuticals, things that he or she shouldn't be doing. And that's different in the sense that that person could be in our care because of his involvement with drugs. It wasn't necessarily a user, right, but was selling and was arrested and convicted of doing such.
What elements do gangs play with these youth?
They play a role. It's not as prominent. I don't believe it's as prominent as you would see it in adult facilities. Gangs have evolved and changed from what society and your average individuals perceive of a gang. When they talked about gangs, you would talk about, large sectors, the Bloods, the Crips, the Disciples, Folk, Latin Kings, all of these big name gangs that people knew. Working with a youthful offender population, while many of them do affiliate or claim to be associated with one of the aforementioned organizations, it's really become more of a geographical thing in regards to where they're from. If I'm from South Florida, I identify with a group of folks from South Florida, or if I'm from another part of the state, if I'm from a particular neighborhood within a city, from a particular street or an avenue or something, I guess it's more geographically aligned as opposed to, the nationwide, organizations that I referenced to earlier.
Can you think of an individual, and I know you probably have several over the years that you've worked with in juvenile justice, but can you point to an individual that was a success story, that somebody that just came back and said, man, I'm doing well, and it was all because of...
Yes, it's I just over the 4th of July weekend, I got a text from a young man. This is a young man who was in our care at a residential facility that I operated in Florida City some years ago. He left our facility and enrolled at a local high school where he won a state championship as a starting linebacker for the football team, and was an all-county, it was an honorable mention all-county delegate in wrestling as well. Graduated from the high school and graduated with honors, and shortly after notified me that he had accepted a scholarship to attend the University of Kansas. So this was a big move for a young man.
Wow.
This was a big move for a young man being from South Day. This was a young man that at one point prior to his arrival at our facility, was being housed at the Juvenile Detention Center in Orange County because he had assaulted and beat up everybody in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. There was no detention center that could hold him. He was, he was the alpha male in there, and he, let you know it. Over the 4th of July weekend, he reached out to me just to verify that I still had the same phone number. And when I acknowledged that I did, sent me a variety of pictures of him in his cap and gown, graduated from the University of Kansas with honors and was accepted into a master's level program there. And while this is one that sticks out, I'm very blessed to say that there's been a number of them. There's been a number of them. I'll tell you another story. I was having lunch with some friends of mine down in a small town called Coconut Grove on the water about a few years back. And waitress comes to our table and brings an assortment of appetizers. And this is just a whole tray with some oysters, some mussels, some fried calamari, smoked fish dip. And I'm like, this looks great. But I said, ma'am, with all due respect, I didn't order that. And I go, this is going to ring up quite the tab over here. She said, no, sir, this is for your table. I said, and I didn't really want to argue with the young lady, but I said, look, ma'am, this is not ours. So, you probably got the wrong table. I don't want you to get in trouble. She said, no, the kitchen manager in the back said that this is for this table, and specifically to say that it's for Mr. Alvarez. Now, I'm only Mr. Alvarez in a professional capacity. Outside of that, everybody knows me as Manny. So when I said Mr. Alvarez, I said, oh, wait a minute, this is somebody. And so my two cousins that I'm there with are saying, well, what's going on and why are they calling you Mr. Alvarez? I said, it's probably someone who I've worked with or knows me in a professional capacity. And about 5-10 minutes later, the waitress came back and said, Mr. Alvarez, a young man in the back would like to know if he could come outside and say hi to you. And as soon as he came out, understanding that this was a young man who was once in my care in the early 2000s. So now this is a 30-some-year-old, adult, and I just don't recognize him. But he told me at what facility he met me at and the type of impact I had on his life. And he says, to this very day, I still speak of the relationship. I was his caseworker. He says, I speak of the relationship that I had with you and my parents. And I said, well, this is so amazing. Thank you. And he goes, I only have one request and he goes, this is the least I could do for you to treat you. He goes, I only have one request. May I please take a picture so I could share it with my mom and dad so they could see the caseworker I used to speak so much about is that I ran into you and you're here eating at my restaurant. So it was really rewarding to see this young man responsible for purchasing of food, menu development, responsible for scheduling and everything. So this young man working in that type of professional capacity at such a prestigious and reputable restaurant was really rewarding, and more importantly, very rewarding for me to see somebody that I hadn't seen in 15 years, and to this day was able to recognize me and acknowledge that the work that we did together helped mold and impact his life in a positive way.
Wow, those are the rewards, I believe, that really take the cake above salary, above the career, where you can see the positive change in someone. In fact, I heard somebody say, "There's nothing better. There's no drug, there's no sex, there's no amount of money that can top when you're being used of God to help someone else." Could you tell me a little bit about that and how the Lord plays a part in all of this?
Yeah, and going back to what you said prior to that, you talked about salary and things of that nature. I always say, if you're in this line of work in the public safety field, you go to any one of our facilities or establishments, you're not going to see many Jaguars, Mercedes-Benzes, or Lexus inside in our parking lots. It's a group of individuals that are there whose professional gratification comes in a non-monetary sense. We almost see ourselves as servants, and you have to understand that our professional gratification comes in the sense that we're providing a service to the generalized public in the form of public safety, but we're having an impact in the lives of the men and young women that we serve, in hopes of one day reintegrating them into their respective communities so they could be respectful and law-abiding citizens within their respective communities. Now, talking about the faith-based component and element, I feel it plays an integral part in the work that we do. There's evidence out there that shows that religiosity is a protective factor. So there's research to validate that incorporating the faith-based component into treatment and your day-to-day regimen decreases the likelihood of these young men or women reoffending. So we're very fortunate at all of our facilities to be able to partner with local faith-based organizations who come in, provide a multitude of services for these young men and women, be it Bible study, weekly service, individualized prayer. We even have folks that come in during certain religious holidays and cater to the religious needs of these young men and women. So we have an outpouring of support from the faith-based community.
You mentioned that young man's family, how he was so proud to take a picture with you, a selfie, and share it with the parents. I know that there are a lot of parents out there that are dealing with this. And sometimes even in a system where we came out of, there's generations where you have a parent that's incarcerated and then they're hearing information about their son or their daughter that is at that age, 15, 16, that is now entering into crime. What role does the family play in coming alongside someone like yourself in helping that child, that juvenile, get to where they need to be?
Yeah, there's probably no greater fear or cause of anxiety for a mother or father than to know that their son or daughter is headed down that path. And it doesn't differentiate whether it's a mother or father who had once been there themselves and knows how bad it could potentially turn out, or the one who's never been there before and is just clueless as to what life is like within the system, and it's just petrified out of fear for the sake of their daughter or son's well-being. We strongly promote family reunification and family involvement. Some of our biggest obstacles in doing that is that many of the families of these respective young men and women aren't geographically located in the same town where their son or daughter is being housed. And I'll give you an example. If we operate a facility in Palm Beach County, we may get residents from North Florida, Central Florida, up in the Panhandle, and you have a parent who's working 2 jobs to make ends meet, has other siblings in the house. To ask that individual to commute from Tallahassee to West Palm Beach and back, difficult for a potential 4-hour visitation session. It's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask in regards to their time. It's a lot to ask in regards to the expenses associated with that travel. But we do everything in our power to help accommodate them. We're very flexible with our visitation hours to help accommodate these families. There's been instances where we've gone and picked them up in our own transportation vehicles and brought them to our facilities. There's been instances where we've coordinated bus passes for them, provided them with gas cards or gift cards to help cover some of the expenses of doing so. So there's a lot of ways that we will work with these respective families and accommodate them, because they play such a critical role in the treatment and the progress of their sons or daughters. We see it. Those young men or women who have a very active family that's involved with the process, constantly in communication with us at our respective facilities, very involved with everything that goes on throughout that process. It's an educational process, and that family is going to be much better prepared to receive that young man or girl when they're released, knowing what's going to be expected of them, knowing what types of behaviors they're going to see, knowing that there's an acclimation period where they've been institutionalized for the last however many months or years of their lives, and now they're transitioning into this normalized environment where they're afforded certain luxuries and liberties that they couldn't even think of just a month or 2 ago. And how do you prepare for that? How do you deal with that? How do you prepare these parents to ensure that they have to understand that there's certain things that these young men and women have to do now as a form of probation and community release to ensure that they don't violate, to ensure that they're meeting with their respective juvenile probation officers regularly, to ensure that they're going to school or maintaining steady employment, to ensure that they're not engaging in the illegal utilization of drugs or alcohol, or committing any additional criminal offenses. So it's critical that these parents be made aware of that. And the ones that are most successful are those parents who have been involved throughout the duration of their stay, so they know, they're familiar with all of these elements, and could assist and play a role in, you know, and ensuring that those young men or women don't ever reoffend.
It truly does take a village. What role can the community, you mentioned some people in the faith-based community played a role in basically helping you along the way. What role does the faith-based community, or is there a role for people in the community to play to come in support of the work that you're doing?
There is, and sometimes I think individuals in their respective communities don't realize how much they bring to the table because they just don't associate with what I do for a living. They don't see a direct correlation between what I do and corrections, but that's not the case. We welcome individuals from our respective communities to come work with us, partner with us, and see how they could be a benefit to us, but in turn how we could be a benefit to them. Give you an example. There's an organization that we work with out of Palm Beach County. That it's an organization that's mothers who have lost a son or daughter to violence, street violence, gun violence. An amazing group of women that we've been fortunate to partner with. And when we first approached them, they were like, well, how could we service you? The first one was to fill a void in some of these young men's lives and help mentor them, show them how the actions that they've once committed have affected them. So now you're talking about offenders talking to actual victims, so if these young men have shot somebody or assaulted somebody or anything, now you're actually dealing with the mothers of these people. So it really resonates and hits home. And vice versa. These mothers, there was a void that was left unfilled when they lost a son or daughter. Every Mother's Day, we have a big Mother's Day event with them where our residents shower them with gifts. They prepare meals for them. They dance, they laugh, they play board games, they take pictures. And it's a traditional Mother's Day in a non-traditional environment, but it's a perfect example of how an outside agency, people in their respective community, could provide a service to us, and in return, we could provide a service to them. And that's just one example of many. Another example that occurred respectively also at our Palm Beach facility, where the local finance community was able to reach out to us and partner with us. Now, you talk about a bunch of high-level finance professionals, bankers, folks who are, whose career involves market, traders, day traders, things of that nature. And you talk about a group of young men where the term financial literacy has never even come across their plate. Well, we were successful in implementing a financial literacy course for these teenage men and women, for these teenage boys. And as part of that course, they were giving some fake seed money that they were able to invest in stock and monitor it over a week-to-week basis as to how it grew or how it did, or whether it was a good or bad financial, investment. As a result of that, the what they considered the top 3 young men who graduated from that class, we had a group of 15 young men. 3 of these young men were awarded with an opportunity of a lifetime. Upon release from our care, they got to visit the New York City Stock Exchange. They got to visit, massive banks in New York City and meet with very prominent financial people at Wall Street. They got to go on the floor where they ring the bell. They got to visit New York City, see the 9/11 Memorial. They got to see the Statue of Liberty. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for young men who had never even been on a bus before, never even been on a plane before, let alone travel to New York City. We partnered with another organization called Suits for Seniors that was successful in providing these young men with suits so they could look the part. We had some support from a local philanthropic organization of a young man who plays in the NFL, the LeBlanc Foundation, who helped provide some financial support for that as well. And with the work of, and I hope I'm okay of saying this, I like to think some of that was the early seeds that we now see in fruition as the Lean On Me organization, and has evolved into something I never thought it would evolve, but it feels good to be here.
Manny, I I hear you talking about all these different people collaborating. There really is no excuse if a young man or a young woman wants to make it. There are resources. There was a time where that was limited, but obviously not today. And I just wanted to look at the camera and look at the population out there who might be incarcerated now in this age bracket. You young guys, you young women, it really doesn't matter what the circumstances look like. It really doesn't matter the past, what the courts say. If you really want to change your life, you can do it. I'm an old man now. I'll be 60 years old soon. But I was destined to never get out of prison, and I was able to change my life. Paul in the Bible tells Timothy, do not let them despise your youth. Now would be the time to say, you know what, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to go the extra mile, do what I have to do. And we're here to tell you, we're not talking fables or fantasies. I don't care about the circumstances. There is a God up there that will back you up if you're really putting forth the effort. What do you think, guys?
I truly believe that. I truly believe that.
I agree. I think the best advice I could ever give a young man or woman who finds themselves in that situation could be found in the good book in Proverbs 16:9, and I always live by it, and I always repeat it. You know, the heart of a man plans his path, but it's the Lord who directs his steps. And as long as you continue to plan your path and allow the Lord to direct your steps, you'll find yourself in a good situation when the time is right.
With that, you have been listening to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. This is Mr. Raul Lopez to my right, and you've been listening to Mr. Manny Alvarez, the Regional Director of Operations for Sequel Youth and Family Services for the state of Florida. This is the Death or Prison podcast, but we say, choose life.
I can change the world. Feed one, teach one boy and girl. Maybe we can change the world.
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plain, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strain. Shepherd